Hi everyone, Heather here with astrologywithheather.com, and I am back with another special video. And this time I have a special guest with me. I have Nahum with me, who is also known as the Spiritual Bodybuilder over on Instagram and on his YouTube channel. And we're gonna have a really fun discussion about nutrition, technology, and astrology, and how these things can converge to help you to live your best life and just to be healthy and happy. So welcome, Nahum.
Thank you very much for having me, Heather. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this down the rabbit hole discussion that we're going to get into.
Yeah, I'm super, super excited. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, health and nutrition and medical astrology in general, which this kind of falls in that category.
It's so prominent right now with everything that's going on. You know, we have these epidemics going on in the world of obesity, of autoimmune disease, of, depression, of, suicide rates are skyrocketing. Why is this going on? And I think that we have on the other side, of the coin, we have a lot of people that are exploring so-called alternative methods of identifying that, these things that have been known for thousands of years, let food be thy medicine. That is so true today. It's ridiculous. And people have forgot about that, right? So I think that bringing this knowledge and awareness of this alternative, which is really the foundation, back into the light of people that are searching for answers, because there's so many people out there searching for answers nowadays.
Absolutely. And you were one of those people before. So before we get into this discussion, let's just give everyone a little bit of a background. So how did you get started in health and nutrition in this industry to begin with? And how did you transition into the more spiritual side of things and astrology from there?
Okay. So I've been an athlete pretty much my whole life. I was in the military for 10 years, but I deployed to Iraq in 2009. And when I went over there, I had my first, big spiritual awakening. I was in Iraq during my Saturn return. So of course, I cracked open like an egg, and I came into the realization of this empathic side of me that I never really accepted before. So when that happened, I leaned on bodybuilding to really, I guess, process the pain or the energy that I didn't know how to work with. And I hyper focused on my nutrition. I've always been very in tune with my body. And that went really, really well for a few years until I started doing it for the wrong reasons. I wanted to go pro, and I hired coaches that, I was looking at the external, view of what I need to be, as opposed to just doing it because I loved it. And eventually it caught up to me. I pushed myself too hard. I started, I was getting on too many supplements and too many performance enhancing drugs, and it really just threw my body way out of whack. I started having serious digestive issues, and it was just really throwing my mind out of whack. So in 2014, after I stopped bodybuilding, I went to massage school, and about 2 months into it, every day that we were there, we got into meditation, basically. And I never meditated before. So after a while, when I was slowing down my mind, I literally, I cracked open again, but this was much deeper on a more emotional level, because I have what's called SCR, which is basically, we hold our emotions in our physical body. And when I slowed down, all that compensation, that armor that I had around me sort of fell away. It came to the surface. So I had like a 2.5 hour seizure, to make a long story short. And it completely shifted my vibration. And I felt like I was going crazy, right? Like a lot of people that when they go through the initial awakening process, you're like, holy crap, what's going on here? And so at that point, that's when I really started focusing on my nutrition, because I was having severe, I couldn't eat foods, it seemed like nothing was digesting. And there was a very deep emotional implication of that. I wasn't letting go of my emotions, right? So through the process, I started working with plant medicine soon after that. And that's, it's interesting. The first time I ever actually felt the vibration of love, unconditional love, was on an ayahuasca journey. Crazy. So that's when I really got much more in tune with, everything that I was putting into my body, without an external goal other than to just feel balanced and healthy and happy. And when I started realizing these emotional implications to the physical body, I got really into understanding the energy. And that's when I started studying astrology as well. because astrology helped, the different celestial bodies represent different archetypes of our personality. So I wanted to understand how I got my own way, right? How I sabotaged myself, how I was being a victim. So I started studying this stuff, and I was being brutally honest with myself. And through the study and process of learning and understanding these things, it's brought up all these emotions, all these blockages in my chakras, nutritionally, physiologically, emotionally, and energetically. And through the years, I've broken through a lot of plateaus. I've had many, many ego deaths, and here I am today.
Yes, and here you are. And that's a very interesting story because, I feel like when people hear spiritual bodybuilder, it almost sounds like an oxymoron. But when you put that whole story together and the progression of things, it makes sense, right? And so that's your foundation, and now you're here where you are right now. And you're helping people with a combination of a lot of different techniques and a lot of different wisdom and understanding that you've gained through the years. And so I could see how that would work really well together.
Yeah, absolutely. I have Chiron conjunct my ascendant. So I up until this point, I've seemed to learn things through my pain. I've taken my pain and my hardships and transformed them into wisdom and knowledge. And, I'm sure the same things for you and, and a lot of light workers out there, that we feel things so deeply. And I think feeling things so deeply makes us more hyper aware and hypersensitive to all these things in our physical body. Like I know you were saying that you were having some similar autoimmune issues from all your experience as well. But again, you're here helping people as well. So it's a beautiful thing to be able to see and realize, like, hey, there is another side. Like even if you're in, even if you're in the dirt or the mud or the shadow or the darkness, there's another side out there, and that gives people hope. So I think that what we're doing here is we're sharing our experience and giving people hope, and seeing that you've helped someone turn around is just the best feeling in existence. I can't even describe it in words. I'm sure you agree.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's that Chiron thing, right? Healer, heal thyself. Like you have to go through the process. The best people to help you are the people that have overcome and gone through the same experience that you're having right now. And so we both share that common ground of like chronic illness, realizing that there's more to this life than this physical, hard reality, and combining all of that information and insight to create something that can help other people. And so the topic of this discussion is going to be nutrition, right? And so you have studied something called nutritional microscopy, which is always hard for me to say.
It was hard for me to say for the first 6 months.
Which is where you look at like a blood sample under the microscope, correct? In order to figure out specific nutritional needs for people.
Yeah. So this PhD that I work with that taught me this course, he discovered this, which is absolutely fascinating. He has this thing called a flow chart where between looking at the live and dry assessment of the blood, you can see through the behavior of how the blood oxidizes under a microscope and how it dries to see how the protein filaments separate themselves. You can identify like ripple effects of activities in the body, even seeing like where toxins are interfering with processes in different organs. The association between the emotional and physiological imbalances. You can see bacteria in the blood, the activity of the immune system. I mean, the list goes on. Like you could go, the study of nutritional microscopy is similar to the study of astrology, where you can just continue to go down rabbit holes and see deeper and deeper things. But it was interesting because after I started really getting into this, I started being able to channel energy, like reading the blood, like energetically. I've actually helped a few people, avoid some very, very serious, like one of my friends had early signs of metastatic growth, or cancerous growth in her uterus, and she was going in that direction, and we changed her diet, but she wouldn't fully change her diet until she went to her doctors like 6 months after I talked to her and said that there were signs that was happening, and she was like, "Oh my goodness,
wow,
how did you know that?" So, like much like astrology, when you learn the little nuances of these things, you learn to anticipate and see the patterns. It's all about identifying the patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can identify it, beforehand, there's just so much good work that can be done. So I've really been able to really learn a lot about just like nutritional practices in general, like, how people, you see all these fad diets out there about, being a vegan or being keto or the vertical diet or the Atkins diet, all these different things going on. But that's sort of akin to like measuring, like if you eat this many calories, how many calories you're going to burn. That's obsolete science,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it doesn't take into account emotional factors. Emotional factors influence how much calories you burn, right? Because stress also influences how, your hormonal state. Are you in a permanent sympathetic dominant state where your body is overly catabolic all the time? You have, your anabolic hormones are being suppressed, and that's going to affect the way that your body burns fat and holds on to these. So there's so much more that is relevant when it comes to nutrition, understanding the body and the mind, that you really have to break it down to everything that's internal, as opposed to looking at outside sources or outside methods. Look at what's going on within, and then facing, like creating new behavior patterns and facing the issues emotionally that are associated with the nutritional and physical issues going on. So some people get a little overwhelmed with all that information usually. So when I do coaching, I start very, very simple. We're gonna start with a baseline of creating a new habit, one new habit every week. And when you do that, it's compound over time. And that's when the real results, permanent results, come.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually kind of corresponds with what you would be doing with astrology, right? Because that's how you can look at all of these different factors through looking at things like maybe the ruler of the sixth house. You can tell a lot about their nutritional habits naturally and what might work and what might not work for them, right? So looking at something like maybe their sixth house is in Aquarius. They're probably not going to stick to a disciplined, regimented routine. They're going to need a lot of variety and excitement in their health habits and in their nutrition, and also, in their workout routines. Or if they have maybe the moon with Venus, they might have a big sweet tooth. So how are you going to satisfy that craving while not overloading on sugar, right? So
absolutely.
How do you approach this? Because this is where I find things get really fascinating, because you can look at it from many different levels.
Oh yeah. So usually I start with the ascendant and seeing whatever planets are around the ascendant to see how their personality is, how they come out to the world. And then I try to look at, of course, the moon and the sun and what houses, and then of course, what sign rules that house. So let's take, Aquarius ruling the sixth house, for example. Mm-hmm. I could see somebody that's like Wim Hof. Do you know who Wim Hof is?
No.
Okay, so Wim Hof created these very dramatic breathing techniques, right? And he's all about like doing cold plunges. Like this dude, like he's broken some world records. I think he ran up Mount Everest in shorts. Some crazy stuff like that. And the guy's like 7 years old, but he's a prime example of like, doing these biohacks for the body and controlling your mind, right? So being very unorthodox and very unconventional and exploring the senses, because Uranus wants to learn and create new things, and through doing that, they're going to teach other people around them, right? So their daily routine is going to be experimental, and or say say like I don't know, if you have Jupiter in the fifth house. Jupiter in the fifth house, like you're just going to want to train and work out and go hardcore all the time, right? Because fifth house is about like athleticism and like being playful, right? So, well, I have Jupiter in my fifth house.
So, I was wondering, I was like, is this you?
Yeah. So, you want to just get out there and move and test your physical body, right? As well as your mental body. I think that when you really get down into it, you could probably establish like a whole nutritional program just based on their astrology.
Yeah, and there are people that do that. I mean, it does get pretty detailed. You can look at even things like micronutrients and how they show up and whether, they absorb this nutrient really well, or if they are prone to also intaking too much fat or too much sugar or too much this or
Oh,
too much
wow.
that. Which it does get really precise, but like the biggest thing though is regardless of what or what their dietary needs are, you're not
Hmm.
going to get them to stick to those needs if there are emotional blockages and
Right.
issues, or if it's completely outside of their natural habits and routines or what they
Yeah.
would actually feel good about doing. And so you have to take that all into account. Nobody's going to go and do like really strenuous, disciplined, the same kind of exercise day in and day out if their Mars, which rules physical activity, is maybe with Jupiter or with Uranus, which would want that excitement, kind of like that Aquarius, or
Uh,
even if Mars is with Neptune, which is what I have. I prefer like more like flowy, spiritual. I'm a yoga instructor, so like that is Mars with Neptune.
you
If
know,
someone tries to get me to go on a treadmill and run, I'm not gonna do that.
right? Yeah, I've actually been doing a lot of research on Neptune and Mars aspects because we have one coming up pretty soon. With
Yeah.
Mars is about to sextile Neptune, so I see that as like the mystic warrior, right? It's almost like I watched this video once on Burning Man where there was a guy that literally looked like he was meditating, started doing this chant, and jumped up and was levitating over the ground. Or say like a Buddhist monk that sits there and like meditates and melts the ice around him on a mountaintop. Like some kind of mastery, but that requires a massive amount of mental discipline. That warrior, or like those guys over, I don't like in like Bangladesh that get those like spikes pierced through like all weird orifices in their body, and they walk around and like do like a marathon of like 3 miles of sticks and and pegs shooting through their face. That stuff's nuts, but like that's where if you combine that oneness energy
Mhm.
with that Mars energy,
And that ability to disconnect with all those spikes.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Now I
fascinating.
know what to aspire to.
Yeah,
Thank
right.
you for that. I have goals.
Get it. There we go.
That's awesome. Yeah. So considering things like that, but also we were talking a little bit off camera about the psychological and emotional components to this, because not only do
Totally.
we store trauma in our bodies, that's something that you understand, that I understand, that a lot of our viewers understand.
Hmm.
But when we have certain emotional blockages and certain, habits that stem from fear or from pain from the past, I mean, that's going to impact our health through our behaviors, but also just through the way that it just impacts the body by sitting with that for so many years. So how do you
Oh, so
utilize
true.
that information in your practice?
Well, so um, when it comes to emotional blockages, say for example, like some people hold on to it and they gain weight, right?
Mhm.
Um, usually it's either they gain weight or they get very tight and stiff, like almost rusty in their
I'm
tissue.
that second person.
Okay. so so as far as the weight is concerned, I've noticed that when we get them, I'm actually working with a woman right now. She's 2 weeks in, and she had a threshold goal of weight she wanted to lose. And it's funny because I have her eating more food, way more food than she was eating before, and now she's losing weight faster than she ever has.
Oh, crazy.
Interesting, right?
Hmm.
Because a lot of people that are obese, they think I need to eat less to lose weight, but that puts the body in a starvation mode, so it actually holds on to it. So I helped her understand this, and as she's losing weight, she's mentioned that, oh, like, I look in the mirror and I see this, it's like I'm like deflating, but it's like cottage cheese showing up, or it's like, like I'm getting these, like I'm doing yoga and I'm feeling all these emotions coming up, seeing or feeling these different feelings in my body that are making me feel loose or fat or something that's associated with why she felt like she had to, hold on to that weight, right?
Hmm.
So when it starts to come off, the emotional implications start to pop up. And that's a big part, whenever those come up, I tell them they have to focus on that foundational, emotional balance and system and structure that we have in place in order to be able to work through it. Now, for someone like in a lot of other people's cases, like when I do neuromuscular therapy, you know, a lot of people have, you know, the whole stiffness, tightness really comes with the inflexibility of their emotions, right? So, you know, from trauma or from conditioned behavior, we feel like, you know, we have to be the certain way in order to get this certain thing done. Like usually it comes down to like, you know, a relationship or financial security, right? Like I got to get up and work and make this happen and do this. And it has to be done this way because I have to provide this safety and security for my family, for myself, or whatever the situation is. And of course, to a certain extent, that's 100% accurate, right? But then over time, we start sacrificing ourselves. And we start, okay, well, I'm not going to eat today because I'm too busy with this, or I got to do that. But when
you're describing me, I feel personally attacked as a Virgo with Pluto on my ascendant right now.
Oh shit. Okay. So like when I'm working on someone and we slow everything down and we open up all that tissue, when that tissue cracks open, when you stretch it, when you get blood flow in, blood flow is like lubrication for all that, you know, tight tissue. That's when the emotions come up. And then that creates what's called an SCR, a somato-emotional release. So it's like this tissue is glued together, then we break it open, and the toxins, the actual like cellular debris that's stuck in there gets brought up, and that affects the emotions. Similar to when you have digestive issues and the bacteria in your gut, you know, send signals to the brain, and they create thought forms, which are also self-limiting and self-defeating. So a lot of times people that have all that tension, they also have some sort of digestive issue. Either, you know, they don't eat a whole lot because they seem to not be able to digest food, or, you know, they go, you know, to the bathroom too much, or, you know, a lot of it has to do with releasing all this energy. So, you know, and that goes along with the chakra alignments. Have you ever read any books by Caroline Myss?
That sounds familiar.
So she's a medical intuitive. She actually created her own style of astrology mixed with tarot, mixed with something. It's actually pretty fascinating. She has her own tarot deck cards and everything. But she created this archetypal system, right? It's her book's Energetic Anatomy. I think, you know, and for all your viewers out there, excellent book to understand the emotional implications of, you know, of the chakra systems.
Yeah, I actually do have that book.
Compensation processes that go along with it. So a lot of digestive issues have to do with root, sacral, and solar plexus chakra, right? A lot of times those are stuffed up first. We start to clear those out. It opens up the heart. Then we feel the emotions from the heart, because the heart connects everything. And then, but that shoots up. And the lower three are all associated with like self-limiting or fear-based emotions. So, and I see a lot of people right now, like especially with this massive amount of awakening going on, when you get cracked open initially, it's opening up that root, that sacral, and that solar plexus. So like that's why people all of a sudden feel like their identities are like, who am I? What am I doing on this earth? And that starts that rabbit hole process, which for everybody it's a little bit different, right? But that's what's great about astrology, because, you know, like I know, like when I do a progress chart or a solar return chart, I can, you know, we can see what's going on right now in relationship to their karmic lessons and their soul growth, and identify, okay, you're right here, so this is where we need to focus and go from here forward.
Yeah, I love your enthusiasm when you're talking about these things. So what do you see in terms of correspondences? So you talked about two different types of people, right? You have the person that is going to like gain weight because they're like protecting themselves and they have all of these emotional things going on, versus the person like me who gets really tight and tense and, you know, has to go and get a massage and do a bunch of yoga and work it out. I would imagine the latter would be more like Virgoan people and people who are more ungrounded or have a lot of Pluto where they want things to be a certain way, versus, you know, well, tell me what you see before I just speculate.
You know, okay, so I'd say the pattern that I've seen in the last few months, particularly doing readings, very powerful Pluto placements, and Usually they are either earth or water dominant. So
That makes sense.
the emotional aspects are like thrown, like there's so much emotional energy coming through them that they don't know how to process it all. And a lot of people right now too, I've noticed have yods in their progress chart,
Okay.
which I like. And maybe it's just people that I've been working with, but it's a lot of people that have been reaching out to me seem to just be going through a massive karmic release from that yod placement. But the Pluto right around the ascendant or in the 12th house.
That would be me.
Or that's you?
I have Pluto right on my ascendant, yeah.
Oh boy. Well, actually, that answers a lot of that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's nicely aspected at least, but
Well,
it's
that's a
there.
plus. Yeah, absolutely. So that's where you get your just you have this energy about you that's very like it draws you in, but like on the surface you appear so just like sweet, innocent, and cute, but like deep down you're like, but I'm gonna change you. You don't even know. Right? Oh yeah.
How did you know that?
You're like the special forces of astrology over here.
That's so funny. And you
Oh
have
yeah,
Chiron on your ascendant, right? You
I do.
mentioned at the beginning. So you're just embodying that, right? You are the wounded healer. Like you had to go through that deep transformation process. And
Oh
now
yeah.
you're acting as a guide for other people. And that's how people are going to view you. And so
Yes. So
it
I
makes
so
a
I
lot of
found
sense.
so I find now that when I'm around people and like I spent some time with a client last week when I was in LA, and we sat down and we spoke, and after about 10 minutes of speaking, I looked her in her eyes and I grabbed her hands and we just sat there and we took a few deep breaths together, and I just channeled my energy into her, and that was it. And literally after 5 minutes, she opened her eyes and she was like, what the hell did you just do to me? um, I was like, I've just helped shift the energy. That's it. So I seem to have come to a point where I embody that energy of the wound, but because, when you get to a point, when you get to this depth of feeling pain, torture, suffering, and whatnot, you get to that point, there's only one way to go but up, and that's the opposite way. And when you go the opposite way, you're able to embody the exact polarity of that vibration,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think that I've just been through so much pain that I'm able to embody this deep vibration of love that most people have not had the depth of experience to embody yet. And I like to think that I help people understand that that's possible, to create hope. And really, that the very first step of understanding that is literally just silencing the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like so many people, minds all over the place. There's like this hurricane of energy going around like their energetic field, because, when we had this mass awakening from this Saturn Pluto conjunction, all this deep, dark crap just came up in the collective. And now it's like, now we all going to deal with it, but we're here because we're meant to deal with it. So when we're able to feel that energy and just center ourselves back into the eye of the storm, then that allows other people to find that place. Almost like we're reaching out our hand, like, come with me, and sit back down in that center. And it's like, okay, I'm okay. Even if it's just for a moment, I know that this place is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's you embodying that Chiron energy. So that's something that would come more naturally to you. And I feel like you're probably the person to ask about Chiron, because we're kind of on that topic of health and nutrition and all of these things. And Chiron represents, it's an actual trauma, like a psychological wound. It
Mm-hmm.
represents, in my opinion, things like guilt and shame and vulnerability that we hold on to from these past experiences. But it often translates to actual physical illness in the chart too. So how do you view Chiron in the chart? What do you see?
In one word, addiction.
Okay.
Because the pain and the suffering has been so great, you tend to want to numb it out, right? Mm-hmm. I was actually just watching the movie Dr. Sleep, the new Shining movie, and so I don't know if you've seen that, but But the main guy in the movie, he has this psychic gift where he can see, he knows things, and he can see like dead people and stuff. But he became an alcoholic because it was too much. It was sensory overload, right? And I think a lot of people that have, you know, extrasensory gifts like that, they go through a phase in their life where they try to numb it out, because it's just, you know, society teaches us that we're crazy, that's not okay, that you're going to be schizophrenic or something. So you just want to try to like block it out. But once you accept it, once you embrace it, you know, like I know I've struggled in my life with binge eating, body dysmorphia, depression, anxiety, you know, like you name it, like I've been there. But I got to a point where I was like, you know what, like clearly I'm going to be around for a while. So I don't want to be like this anymore. So I got like hyper disciplined, and that's actually where bodybuilding came into play for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked really well. Like instead of taking all that intense, overwhelming energy and just distracting myself, I chose to go within. And that's really like the main switch that I would say that for Chiron you have to make, because eventually if you do continue to feed that imbalance, you know, it will result in disease. Now, you know, the feelings of guilt and shame that are sort of the dominant vibrations of that Chiron energy, you know, those usually end up resulting in some form of, you know, cancer or some form of autoimmune disease, right? Maybe even some kind of a psychological imbalance, like, you know, like borderline personality disorder or some kind of bipolar disorder, because, you know, if you try to suppress it for too long, too much, you almost become dissociated from reality, right? So at some point, you know, especially with people, I think people with Chiron in their first, fourth, or 10th or 12th house, really, they deal with really intense situations like this. Of course, it depends on how it's aspected, right?
Yeah.
But for the most part, those are where like the real, you know, deeply embedded wounds are. Especially the 4th and 10th house is going to come usually from the mother or the father.
Yeah.
And, you know, so facing that and feeling that, and then doing the ancestral work really to purge it out. You know, we have to grow through that. So, and really all these things, it all comes back to the same fundamental process, because, you know, we're all human. We all have 5 senses. We all, you know, feel essentially the same kind of things. So no matter what someone is going through, they can come back to, okay, we need to establish a new pattern. We need to slow down the mind. We need to focus on what we can control, let go of what we cannot control. How do you do that? You take it one day at a time, one breath at a time. You go forward, you know, and stay focused, you know, the best you can. And if you lose focus, you just come right back and don't beat yourself up about it, right? It's a one day at a time process, you know, because really the issues really stay in there from your mind being in the past or being in the future. So it's nice that once you figure that out, okay, the answer is the same every time. Just come back, just come back, just come back. And and eventually, you know, you find that thing that sticks. You get that little piece of reassurance, or that little part that clicks that tells you, okay, it's working. Now I have hope. Now I can build confidence. Now I can really come to that next level. And the more you build out, it's compound interest. Those little pieces of the puzzle, they build on themselves, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger until finally, boom, you're out there with that self-confidence, representing, you know, what you embody in the world, and everything turns around. Beautiful.
Yeah, I love that description about kind of numbing yourself out to Chiron, because like that Chiron is so uncomfortable. It's the most uncomfortable energy in your chart. And that makes complete sense. I actually have never thought about it that way, that people do tend to kind of numb themselves out from it, and they want to avoid it, and they don't want to address that energy. And what you just described, sort of doing a little bit every single day, like it's a daily practice that you have to always come back to. That is absolutely the best way to address it. And even with that, you see the examples of things actually changing changing and your perspective actually changing in life and getting that actual real feedback, one of the things I often instruct people to do, and I should instruct them to do more often, is when they see those changes, write it down. Keep a journal of it, because that's what I do. And it's like, it's such reinforcement. Anytime you feel like, oh crap, I can't handle this anymore, especially with the health stuff and especially with the past trauma that you're overcoming associated with Chiron, you go to that journal and you say, well, 2 years ago I was here, but look, I made all this progress. I have pages of proof that things are improving and that this is working for me. So I love, love, love that advice. I think that's wonderful.
Hell yeah, me too.
Yeah. So I feel like we've covered a lot of ground here. Is there anything else you want to discuss before we sign off?
Yes, actually.
Okay.
This is a little bit off topic, but this has to do with the current energies, because I'm really feeling something big with this Mars conjunct the South Node coming up.
Yes.
And I don't know what you're feeling about that.
I'm feeling terrified because for my own well-being. No. I feel like there is going to be some sort of very immediate, very intense situation. I think that's going to come up more on a global scale. But on a personal level, this is kind of like an energy where it's a big major purge once and for all. And really what that means, it depends on the person and their chart, right? So if it's aspecting in a very difficult way, like a really important planet or point in your chart, then this might be a really difficult time, because it's like you've been building toward letting go of something. You've been working on restructuring and releasing anything toxic in that area. And we just had an eclipse there, right? To help you through that process, to force you to let go of something. Anyone who's still holding on to whatever it is that they are being called to let go of, I feel like this is going to be a very quick, very intense wake-up call where it's like, you have no choice, you have to act now, you have to get rid of this. And so that for some people is going to be really challenging.
Get over here, you need to go this way. Yeah, I agree. That's going to be my son is at 10 degrees of Capricorn, so that's going to be pretty close to my son.
That'll be interesting there.
Yeah.
Luckily, though, that new moon that happens in Pisces just a few days after the conjunction between Mars and the South Node is exact, will actually be, and Mars will actually be in trine with Uranus too, just prior to that configuration. But that new moon, actually that new moon I think happens just before, just after, it's within that time frame. But it's going to be in sextile with Mars and in sextile with Uranus. And so I think this is an opportunity where you can take advantage of that energy with a fresh start by approaching it more like intuitively and kind of feeling it out a little bit more.
Especially with Mercury retrograde in Pisces, it's all about intuition right now. And even that intuition is going to seem a little cloudy, but I think that it's because it's trying to get us to focus more on what we feel and less on what we think, right? That's where all the answers are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's hope too. It's not going to just be like a big, like, oh my God, this is going to be terrible. There are supporting aspects. You have to think outside the box. You have to use your intuition. And if you're able to sort of surrender and like, because this is a big surrender, right? It's like you have to surrender now. You have to surrender hard. If you're able to do that and just let go of the way that you think things need to be and the way that, and the stuff that you're really trying to hold on to because to you it has value, or, in the past it had some sort of value to you. I think everyone will be fine. It's just the letting go is so hard for people. And that's what we were talking about with the tightness and all of that. I feel like people are going to be like, oh, I don't know.
Get massages, people.
Yes, that's a good time for a massage.
Go floating or do something that's going to help purge toxins and purge the tightness in your body. Binaural beats, anything that you can do to help release this control mechanism that we all have to some extent. Some of us have just created that pattern of behavior to learn how to get through it. But I think I can feel it coming up. I can feel it getting ready to go out. Even no matter how long you do this, it never feels any easier or better. It's always freaking tough, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Because we know that there's it's temporary, and there's hope, and there's good things coming on the other side of it. So, just remember, everybody, that there's, sunshine after the rain. And after this big purge, things are going to get better. I'm really excited for the Jupiter conjunct Pluto aspect coming up.
Yes, that'll be that'll be an interesting one. That is like a supercharged energy right there. Very intense. I think people are going to be making some massive changes. Like it'll be like massive growth all at once, or like massive, the opposite, right? Massive purge and letting go all at once. But it's going to feel either really positive, like I'm accomplishing so much, like it's crazy, I'm super determined, or it's going to feel like a huge, massive relief. So it depends on, again, because Pluto works in extremes, right? What end of the spectrum are you on? What do you need right now?
What do we need right now? Exactly. Exactly. So the universe is going to give us exactly what we need.
Yeah.
Just trust that. Trust what you need.
Says.
Yeah. Right. No kidding.
Yeah.
Well, Heather, this is so much fun. Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on here, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, I would love to. This has been a lot of fun. And and thank you so much for being here. So pleasure. For anyone who wants to find you, where can they do that?
My Instagram is my primary platform. It's at spiritual_bodybuilder. And then my YouTube is Spiritual Bodybuilder as well. So, I do new moon, full moon, and monthly energy reports. And then on my Instagram, I do, daily energy reports. So, check me out. Yeah, absolutely. I think some people will. And I'll post the links to your Instagram and to your YouTube channel, especially down in the description below. And so if anybody wants to find you, they can find you there. Awesome. And so thank you so much. And thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.